Good morning to our viewers in the United States, and good afternoon to our viewers in Europe. I'm Steve Sokol, the president of the American Council on Germany. Thank you for joining us today. Here in the United States, it's fair to say that the COVID-19 pandemic has disproportionately affected low-income and minority communities, increased the digital divide, shown weakness in the healthcare system, and changed the nature of everyday life, including work and education. But even in a country like Germany with a strong social welfare net, the same is true. Although Germany was able to suppress the spread of COVID-19, the pandemic has taken a toll on the social system and on the economy. Joining us today to talk about the societal impact of COVID-19 is Bundestag Member Ekin Deligőz. She serves on the Bundestag's Budget Committee and as spokeswoman for the Bavarian Greens in the Bundestag. Ekin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, you're welcome, Steve. I'm pleased to see you again.
It has been too long. I wish that we were seeing each other in person, but this is a good substitute under the circumstances. I'd like to also tell our viewers that today's event is part of a series titled Virtual Transatlantic Town Halls, German Bundestag Member Dialogues, and is being held as part of Wunderbar Together USA 2020. This is a comprehensive and collaborative initiative funded by the German Federal Foreign Office and implemented by the Goethe-Institut. Ekin Deligőz joined the Greens as a student and belonged to the Bavarian chapter of the Greens youth organization. She has served in the Bundestag since 1998. In 2017, she was one of 14 politicians of Turkish descent who won seats in the federal parliament, which now has over 700 seats altogether. Ekin, last week, you were in your home district in Bavaria, and among other things, you were there to take stock of the problems and challenges resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic, but also to measure the pulse of voters. For example, in Günzburg, you participated in a discussion in a beer garden under the heading Grün hört zu, or The Greens Listen.
Listens.
What did you learn from this and other conversations that you had while you were out and about in your Wahlkreis last week?
Well, thank you for this question, Steve. First of all, we are missing all of our friends from US, and we are especially missing the dialogue with you. So it's a good opportunity to talk to each other and come together, because I think if all of us need a solution for the COVID-19 problems, and we can just solve it together. And this makes the difference, that it's not a problem of a country or just a part of the world, it's a problem for the whole world. And this is also what was the main consciousness between the people talking to me. I've been in a lot of beer gardens, I can tell that, because the problem is, as politicians, we are not allowed to enter the closed rooms and meet more than 100 people per time, and we need all the lists of the people coming to our conversations. So under these circumstances, it's a hot summer, it's a good time, so I met the people outside. And there have been a lot of people coming. It was really kind of surprising and exhausting at the same time, because there have been a lot of people, most of them coming first time to a political conversation, just to talk about their situations. You have got both parts. The one who have got seriously problem, who don't know how September will start for them, hard times in their jobs, hard times in their economic situations, but you've got also a lot of people who want to take more potentials of the crisis and to say, okay, we've done a lot, it was a hard time, but now we want to go over it, and we were expecting the worst, but we knew that we are a strong country with a strong social system, and we don't want the politicians to show us fear, we want to talk about hope. And there was a second thing, most of them says we do want the same conditions all over the country. This is really a serious problem in Germany, because we have got the 16 Bundesländer, means a different, we are a federal system, and you've got 16 different systems of social security in the time being. beginning with the mask. Where should I wear the mask? Sometimes in Bavaria, you have to wear it. In Baden-Württemberg, just across the border of 10 meters, you don't need to. And this means also the same conditions for the sectors. They don't understand that, for example, in the summertime, the people are not allowed to go into a swimming pool, but they are allowed to go into a park with, you know, all that Lego park for the children to play. And so there are 10,000 people in such a recreation park, but they are not allowed to go for 100 people into a concert or cultural distribution or something like that. And this, the people think the same condition for all, and not a security, a kind of security coming from the policy which tells us what to do and not to do, but this must be the same for all sectors and not the difference. And the third thing the people are asking for and expecting from the politicians is to look forward. What will happen if the school starts? Think about our children, think about the system, and which is really new. There is a kind of ecological consciousness coming from this time of shutdown. The people are starting, for example, for consumption in the local area. They are looking for local milk and butter and eggs and vegetables. They are really critical about having apples from Chile or grapes from Australia. They say, we have got the same in Germany. We should do the more of the consciousness in the way of our consumption starts.
So Ekin, before we sort of unpack some of the challenges that you just described, did anybody that you met with say that this unprecedented period has brought positive developments for them? I mean, you did touch on that a little bit by saying that people wanted to take advantage of the crisis, but were there others who commented about, I don't know, having more time with their families or being able to focus on things that was a little bit more positive than what we hear so often about the negative challenges?
Well, there are some of them. There is, for example, a questionnaire for young people in Germany from the Center of Social Workers of Thüringen, and they asked children and young people, how was your time? What was the best and what was the worst? And the best thing was the family stood together. They had time for themselves. They had time to cook and play and just watch TV. Things that not happening in the normal life. Some of them said that they really enjoyed the time of having time, for example, for doing their homeworks. There was no stress, no time limits. They could start at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock. It's not like in the school, you have to be there at 7:55. The school starts in Germany at least at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I think this was the good part. The bad part for the young people especially were they were missing other young people. And it's the same with us as parents or elderly people. We are missing other people. We are really social beings, but having time for just thinking, looking out of the window, cook for ourselves, especially that was a winner in this time.
So one of the challenges, one of the serious challenges that you touched on earlier was employment and work. And I'd like to talk a little bit about the impact of the pandemic on small businesses, because I know that you spent some time last week talking with small business owners and representatives. And COVID-related support measures have started to run out in many cases, or will be running out. Many business owners have used up some of their reserves that they had put aside for challenging times. But what did you hear from those small business owners about their view of what the fall might look like, what the future might look like?
Well, this is the problem we have. You know, we have got, as I don't know if you know, but we have spent a lot of money in the weeks behind us. The German budget of the Bundestag is something about 350 billion euro. It's something about $370 billion, I think, something like that. And we've spent at least the half of it on the top for social welfare, for help systems, for COVID-19 help system, especially for different kind of sectors, from the industry to manufacturing to social workers and more. But there's been one group who fall down under all these help systems, and this was the people coming from the part we called self-employed, the people who don't have chiefs. It's just a small group, small companies, just one-person companies especially. They got the money for their well, for part of their spending, but not for living, not for their daily costs. Some of them, for example, in Baden-Württemberg, you know, 16 Bundesländer have got 16 different answers. In Baden-Württemberg, they could just go there and take the money for their living, but in the rest of the Germany, it was not allowed. And this meant for these people to go and ask for social welfare. Social welfare in Germany by the time now is 430 euro, but you only can get this money if you don't have private money on the side, and if you're not in a partnership or married in a couple with somebody who's earning money. If there's you're living in a couple, you don't need to be married. The couple is belonging together, so you don't get social welfare. And for these people who were earning well, a lot of people who were in the culture, for example, or technicians of a concert who had really good income, fall down from a very good earning to non-earning, especially the one having hotels or restaurants or coffee shops, fall down to zero. And going to a social welfare, it was a hard step for them. And so most of them didn't go there. And so for them, it's really a hard time. And we don't know what will happen if the autumn begins, because in the summertime now, people can do a lot of things outside. But what will happen if the weather is not, it's rainy and it's cold and the people don't want to get outside? What will happen to all these restaurants, beer gardens, and coffee shop? Well, this is the main question which was addressed to me during the whole tour.
And here in New York, it's similar as well, where outside dining is possible, but indoor dining is not. And of course, here in the US, there are different policies in different states and different parts of states. But here in New York City, that is one of the big questions as well, as the days get shorter and as the weather changes. So all of us are sort of sitting on the edges of our seats and waiting to see what will happen next. And in that regard, one of the things that I'd like to ask you about is unemployment and Kurzarbeit measures, because one recent trend has been that unemployment is going up despite Kurzarbeit measures, which kept people at least partially employed and with a partial income. And in theory, makes it easier once the economy starts up again to have people to fill the ranks and take on the responsibilities that they had previously had. But how do you think this will develop in the coming months? Do you have any sense of what unemployment or employment might look like moving ahead?
The thing is, yes, I don't know if you know the social system of unemployment in Germany, but we have got two systems. The first one is if you get unemployed for the first year, and if you're older than 50 years old, for 18 months, you get 67% of your last net income. And after that, you're in the social welfare system with 430 euros. And adding to that, your social security and housing. And if you are in Kurzarbeit, it's a German word, short-time work or part-time work, would maybe in English be better for that. You are paid the whole sum, but only working less. This means you're working 80% and you're getting for a time, half a year, as long as it needs for a certain time of unemployment. You get the full income, net income, not brut net income. And And so the companies are allowed to ask for it in a situation of crisis. This is a kind of security system. 10 million people from companies asked for this money this year, but there is a difference between asking and taking the money. Only 3.7 million people are really in part-time. All of them it was kind of precaution to ask for it, but they didn't took the money. From this 3.7 million, after 3 months, most of them fall back, and now we're talking about 1 to 2 million people still in part-time. We know from the sectors like industry, we've got increasing, for example, export, especially in the machinery, is increasing 30% this month. This is a hard increasing number for this month. And we've got the biggest problem in the part of service. Service means all the people working for other people, starting from small companies, restaurants, hotels. And also there is a development because we never had so much tourists inside the country. You know, we've got a summertime, the people are on vacation, they want to go somewhere, and the tourists are staying at home. They're going to eastern part, to western part, Bavaria. For example, if you've ever been in Bodensee, the biggest lake, Lake Constance in Germany, you can't even drive there by bike because there are so many people that there is no space anymore for biking. And so for this month, time is good, but what will happen in the winter time? This is the big question. Mm-hmm. But you know that the new thing is that this crisis is not in this industry, the crisis is in the service, and this is new to Germany.
And I think, I think that's true everywhere. As you were saying, this is a global challenge. It's not a national or a regional challenge, and many economies are dealing with the same consequences. And it is largely the service sector that is being affected by this. One of the things that we were talking about before our line went live is how the pandemic has increased some gaps in society. We talked about challenges going back to school and some of the educational shortcomings. And I guess I'd be interested in hearing from you a little bit more about how you think the pandemic has increased some of the inequities that already exist in German society, whether it's widening the gap between the haves and the have-nots, whether it's increasing educational shortcomings for some individuals, or even how the pandemic is affecting the gender pay gap in Germany. I think all of these are topics that were important before the pandemic, but have become worse because of COVID-19.
Well, this is a really very important question, because we can see as people with social empathy that there is a fall back in a lot of questions. This is racism, this is chauvinism, this is a falling back in the social life between gender. I will give you some examples. For example, people coming from Asia were not able to go on the street for a certain time because they were all shouted at as a responsibility for COVID-19. Or people coming from outside as workers to Germany, and we definitely need them in some parts, especially in service or agriculture, had hard time to coming into the country and finding housing, places to stay, or kinds of good, well-paid jobs. And there is more to that. The people are getting really, in some parts, aggressive. There is more, it's the normal daily life, you know, people sitting side by side at a bus or metro, shouting to each other, really racist in a racist way. And the same with chauvinism. I had a speech in the last week of the German Parliament before we go to the summer break. It was about our second our second program for help system and the social system, and I told them it was a discussion in the parliament, within the parliament, of 90 minutes. And within this 90 minutes, there have been only 3 women together talking 10 minutes. And what I told was that there's been 50% of this country are women. Women did a lot in this time because they're working as nurses, they're working in the service stations, they're working home office and homework of their children at the same time, and they're kind of really important for our system, but they don't have the place and the time within the parliament to talk about this. That only 10 minutes, about 90 minutes of discussions. The reaction was on Twitter and Facebook that people wrote to me that women should not work within the parliament because they are narrow-minded and they're not able to work, and women should stay at home, and that it is irresponsible from a mother to work. And this is Germany in the best before the Second World War, I would say, or maybe at 1915 it was the thinking. And we've got a kind of falling back. This sounds like a story of a minority, but it's not. I had this roundtable with women last week, and there have been a lot of women coming from mothers, stay-at-home moms, working class people, people who had companies, young women coming from the universities, and they told me all the same. There is an expectation to us that we have to solve the social problem of this time, that they have all alone to cope with money problems, and the men are still working and the women are staying at home for the children, staying at home for the social system. And this is the problem. It's a kind of fallback of feminism. It's a fallback for women, and it's a fallback of people from different countries, different places to work and live together. And this is going on in our school system. I will give you another example. If you're at a school like Gymnasium, it's a further school in Germany, there have been a lot of young teachers who had this Microsoft Teams and met their children, and they had all the Zoom conferences and homeschooling via video, and they had the computers at home, etc., etc. There have been other schools where the teachers did nothing except to sending one WhatsApp to one of the parents who has to send it to the other parents just once a week. And if you're coming from a less income family, these families were out of the school system in a digital way because the schools are not in the digital system. And this makes the difference. For the one students, it was a lost year. For the others, it was a new experience. And between having a new experience and having nothing, there is the place where the future chance starts or falls down.
So speaking about schools, particularly as different Bundesländer get ready to go back to school, have there been any lessons that were learned during the first half of the year as we were all trying to grapple with the situation, so that schools and parents and students are in a better position when things get going in the coming weeks?
Yeah, well, as a mother of 2, and my daughter is 12, she just started school last week. There are a lot of measures for us parents as well as our children. First of all, the children are in small groups. This means the school needs more space. They're at this time in August, they can go outside, but what will happen in the winter? The same question. The second is we have got really serious measures about our children washing their hands, learning. For example, the school does not start at the same time for all children. The children has got time tables when they come to school and leave the school. Not the whole school is coming at the same time. There is always 10 minutes difference between the ages of the children. First, the young one starts, and then the next group is coming, and the same with recreations, and the same with going back at home. And they sit always at the same place. They need the mask out of the classroom, and they learn to cope for a long term with this COVID-19 system. It's a kind of system, it's a kind of marathon, it's not a short-term solutions. And the schools are better prepared if there will be a second shutdown. For example, in the digital way, there is from the German Bundestag, there is a volume of 5 billion for schools to buy some devices for the children and the teachers, and working on network. Most of them work on school special network. It's made by Goethe-Institut in Germany or by Microsoft. I have to tell this. These are the second biggest systems, and they're working like we on Zoom, on Microsoft Teams, or their own systems. But I think that if there is a shutdown, they're better prepared than in the last half of year. But our children are coping okay with it. They're prepared, they're young, they're flexible, it's a new life, but it's important for them to meet their friends. And for them, it's really, really important to have the friends of the same age. It's more important than staying at home. So we as parents, we are doing our best that we have to take the responsibility for us. I will give you an example. People who are traveling to countries within the Europe with a high numbers or increasing numbers of COVID-19, they have to do the test and not sending their children into the schools if the test is positive. This is the responsibility of the parents.
Mm-hmm. We've received a question from a viewer, and I'd like to remind our viewers to ask their questions using the chat function in Zoom or by sending me an email at sokol@acgusa.org. And the viewer is asking whether some Bundesländer have been more severely impacted in economic terms than others, whether you can talk a little bit about the different impact of the pandemic on different regions.
Well, first of all, numbers were very different. In the southern part, the ones who were at the skiing, like Bavaria, I'm coming from, has a really high rate in February and March. It was not like that in the northern part, but now in the northern part, for example, in the production of agriculture, where we have got a lot of people coming from Poland, Romania, the eastern part of the Europe, where the people are just coming as workers in the agriculture, living together in small spaces. We have got a high rate of COVID-19 disease. And so I would say this means that within the different Bundesländer, there are different territories where we've got a higher impact. And for this, we've got also higher impact on the production, for example, agriculture. We don't have cucumbers this year in Germany. If you want to buy cucumbers, you have to pay the double of the price because there haven't been any production of it because of the missing workers at the agriculture. And the same with the car industry. As you know, the car industry in Germany, every sixth workplace is depending on the car industry. They had really main problems on production, but this is not coming really from COVID-19. This is coming from the industry by themselves, and there is a higher potential of crisis because of COVID-19. This means they had the problem before, and they're now having it more of it. Or the part of mobility. I can tell you all the flight industry. A lot of people don't want to take a flight because we don't know how secure the air into the airplanes is. And for a time, there haven't been any flights at all within the country. This means you couldn't fly from Berlin to Munich or backwards. And they've got really, really severe problems.
Well, and I should plug one of our previous discussions, because just last week we had a conversation with a senior executive from Lufthansa about the impact of the pandemic on Lufthansa, but also on the travel industry altogether. And he talked about how certainly Lufthansa, but also other airlines are trying to bring confidence back to travelers through some of the measures that they're taking, through testing, through contact tracing, but also through the filtration systems that they have in their airplanes. But Ekin, I mean, so much of what we're talking about is unique, right? This is, I think, the word that will define 2020 is unprecedented, to have a challenge like the challenge that we're experiencing right now. And from everything that you're describing, it seems clear that Germany's social welfare net is under strain. You, of course, serve on the Bundestag's budget committee, and over the past 6 months, there's been a tremendous increase in expenditure for things like healthcare and unemployment benefits directly related to the pandemic. As we move into the fall, we'll have a better sense of what those costs have actually been, but also what the cost moving forward will be. And so I guess my question to you as a member of the budget committee is, has there been any discussion about a recovery package for Germany's social welfare net?
Well, I will give you as an information some numbers of the social welfare system of Germany. These numbers are really high, don't be scared. We are a big country with 83 million people living here and a really, really high-class social welfare system. So in the social security system, this means unemployment, pensions, health sector, all of them, long-term health and short-term health system. We have got 440 billion euro per year just from the security system. And add on what we are giving from the German budget within the social system, it's nearly 50% of our 350 billion budget. This makes a high sum of money. Within the COVID-19 time, from the March to now, we spent 200 billion extra in the health system add-on and in the social welfare system. For example, at the social welfare, we have got an easy access. There is no controlling of different circumstances. This means if you've got money at side up to 30,000 euro, there is no control about it. Things like that. It's small steps, but which makes a huge add-on in the sum in the end. And this means for this year, I don't think that we will get big problems, because all this, Germany is a country we didn't had problems in the last 7 years. We have got nearly a really good economic system. We didn't have high rate of unemployment. So it was good years for Germany. So we can cope with this problem for this year. This is not like that the next year, because if the people are not working, they're not paying into the security. So the security needs the money from the budget. And in the same time, our income is not increasing, so we will get some problems. So we have to do some changes. There are only 3 steps of changes. Whether you take more money, this means the people pay more. This will be a hard time because, as you know, we will have elections next year. Or we can shorten our social system. This means we don't pay for special things. This is also a problem because we are in an election year. And the third thing is we're looking out for new credits. And this what will happen in Germany. I think that we have to keep up taking credits. And the big question is what will be done with this new money into the system. You can put this new money into new infrastructure, or you can make some presents. We are at this time, for example, every family is getting children's money. It's called 300 euros per family this year. We can't do this again the next year. because this means a lot of money and there is no effect of it because the people takes the money but they don't give it out. There would be more effective if I put the money into the school system, into the social system, into the social infrastructure. What will happen to our swimming pools? Can we open them up next year? What will happen, for example, children's vacation homes? They are all closed now. What will happen to them if you don't open them up? Will there be any vacations for children of less welfare, less income families? Or what will happen of all these cultural belongings, theaters, concert halls, all this, what brings the people together? What is the future of these institutions? This is the question we have to ask for.
So I'd like to fold in two viewer questions that relate to this somehow. One is, before COVID-19, there were discussions in the Bundestag and in the health ministry about reducing healthcare overcapacity and really trying to be more accurate in terms of what the needs were within the healthcare system. Do you think that there will be a change in these attitudes?
I hope so.
Now?
Yeah, I mean, you have been in Germany several times. We have got the big cities and we've got a lot of landmarks with really small cities. For example, the part I'm coming from, you've got a really high grade of industry, a lot of people at work, and we've got just a small hospitals and then a lot of this, you know. I think we've got four or five little small hospitals. If you are talking about overrating, you have to close down at least 4 of them. But this means for the people, if you need to drive to a hospital, you need an hour, sometimes 1.5 to get to the next center. And if it's an urgent situation, this means death or life. And therefore, we need this infrastructure, especially in the landscape. And this means we have to invest in them. And there is no, some of the social security systems are talking about overbedding, but the problem is not the overbedding. The problem is that we've got a high concentration in the cities and less infrastructure in the landscapes, and we have to find the balance between both. And you won't earn money from a hospital where only 100,000 people lives, but you have to invest in this infrastructure for these 100 people to take the life quality and life chances.
So the next question goes in a slightly different direction, but it also has to do with trying to find solutions. And there are obviously people who are in precarious financial situations, and it is, you know, a big challenge to try to keep those people from falling into poverty. And so one of our viewers is very curious to know whether there are any models or any role models that you are looking at, that Germany is looking at when it comes to keeping people who are at risk from falling into poverty.
Well, role models, I would say I'm one of the role models because I'm coming from a Turkish family. When I came to Germany when I was 8, and if it depends just on the society and the school system in Germany, I wouldn't be at the German Bundestag or studying at a university. This is not the normal way, but within the system you can do that, but you need also a lot of people believing in you, and you need your parents, you know. In Germany, if your parents are academics, the children are getting academics to 96%. If the parents are not academics, there is only 20% of the children who could be maybe go into a university. And if and most of the migrants are staying at the same level or falling back because of the education system, because the education system in Germany tells you at the grade of 4, when the children are something between 8 to 10, you can go to a university or you have to stay in a less educated version. We are separating the children very early, and we don't just give the chances to these children to grow up in the social status. So all begins with a good education. This is the part, because the chances of the children to growing up within the society should not depend on the income of their parents. And this is where we should start. And this means also changing the thinking of the teachers in some schools. Because I have been at a school, I will give you this example. It's called middle school. It's the school, some of them very naughty tells it's the school for the rest children, the children who don't have any place within the society. It's really naughty to telling something like that. And they tell me, don't encourage these children that they can reach everything in their life because they're not allowed to. And this comes from a teacher. We need more teachers who are believing in their children, because children are just children, and you have to cope with their situation and opening up the situation for new chances to growing within this and not falling back.
Ekin, you've talked about many of the challenges that lie ahead, but you also said that when you met with people in your Wahlkreis, in your district last week, many of them had a positive outlook. Many of them said this is also an opportunity. It's a challenge, but it's an opportunity, and we're looking for hope. And so I guess my question to you would be, are we at an inflection point because of COVID-19? And what lessons can we learn from this moment? And perhaps as a footnote to that, I'd like to fold in a question from one of our viewers, which draws on what you were saying about the role of women and gender roles in Germany, and that the pandemic has sort of pushed the role of women back by 50 or more years. The viewer asks, is there a way forward? So I know that that's a lot. Is this an inflection point? Is this an opportunity? What are some lessons that can be learned? And specifically, as that relates to gender parity, is there something positive that you can share with us?
Well, I'm a politician in this country, and I'm believing in having courage, and I'm believing to having better times. This is what we are working for, and what the expectation of the people to us is. And this means we have to work on the potentials of this crisis, and we have these potentials. I can give you some examples. For example, mobility. The people learned that it's not the important thing of all to fly to any island of Spain for 19 euros. That we can't cope with the costs of having always the easiest way. And, I don't know the English word for it, guides, not spending money.
Frugal, to be frugal.
To be frugal, it's the best way of coping with life. And some people learn to go by train. This is really new to them, and Germany is really small. I mean, compared to US, we are a mini country, and we can use it, but we have to invest in this. Or, as I told you as an example before, some families tell me, well, we didn't know that we could get the milk from just across the street. We always bought it from Ireland, our butter, and get our eggs from the eastern part of Germany, living in the southern part, but we can also buy it just across the border from the shop there, and we don't need all this. So quality of life, come back to Germany. The people are not asking for consummation of the easiest way, of big consumptions, but of quality of life. And everybody is starting to define quality of life in a different way. For some of them, it's having more time within the family and friends. For others, is having another agriculture, or using another way of mobility, and for others is just staying at home in the garden, and for different ones is having the vacation just across the border at the seaside and not somewhere in the world and flying in a short version to Taiwan or Thailand or somewhere else. This is the one part. But this other part is we've got also thousands of people every Sunday on the street fighting against this. People who don't believe that there could be a change, who don't believe and who don't trust in the infrastructure of this country, in the democracy of this culture, who are really fighting for a Germany of, I don't know, I can't even tell the older times, because which time should that be without any, just a society of white men? I mean, I can't even say a society of white people, because it's just a society of white men. And this white man definition doesn't exist anymore. Not here, not in US, nowhere in the world. We need each other, and we need a society for staying strong, also being together and coping together and looking out for solutions together. And there's no difference between men and women and migrants and not migrants and black and white. There is no black and white anymore. We are all staying together, and thousands of people in this country still don't understand and still don't want to understand this. And this is making me really angry, and from time to time also scary.
Well, and Ekin, obviously another topic that we could spend at least an hour, if not much longer, talking about is diversity and inclusion in the United States and in Germany, and how that is evolving. In many senses, it's not changing quickly enough. But in both countries, there is a huge debate about social justice and social equity at the moment, and it's something that needs to be considered as well.
Yeah, definitely. I will tell just one sentence to the question of gender, if I may. The gender, you can solve the gender problems if you've got more role models. We need them in companies. We need them definitely in politics within the German parliament. In the last years, we had always something about 30%. In this part, now in this season, we've got something about 20%. I mean, this is a number, I think in the last 50 years, we didn't have that less women. And this also coming up with all these new parties from the right-wing parties or hard right-wing or sometimes racist parties means also a rollback for women. So we have to be against all this new way of, I don't want to use the word conservatism because it's too nice to tell them just conservative. Conservative could also be something good, but the old way of thinking, and we have to cope with it. We can do it in different ways. The first is the education of the women. The second is investing in women, and the third is giving them chances to be seen, you know, in the media, for example. Why aren't there more interviews with women, with politicians, female politicians, except Merkel? There are some more, and giving some words, some spokespeople jobs to this women, so we can cope with the situation. We need them more openly in the open society.
Well, Ekin, that's a great segue for me, because I would be remiss if I did not ask you about national politics and about next year's election. You mentioned earlier that you are a politician, of course, and you also touched on the fact that Germany will have a national election next year. Trying to pull some of the threads of our conversation together, many of the financial decisions that are being made this year to deal with the pandemic will have to also be addressed by the next government. And with a view to elections in Germany in the fall of 2021, what do you think are the biggest challenges that the new government will face?
Well, as a social politician, I would always start with social politics, but I think the main question will be different this time. The philosophical question is, will we go on like the time before the crisis, or is there any change within the crisis? And if we say yes to a change is coming, we have to start with it in the agriculture, in the mobility, electricity, the new systems within Germany of social infrastructure. For example, what is the future of the schools? What is the future of the education? What is the future of migration policy? What is the role of the migrants, the new migrants? I'm not talking about me and my family because we are the old one, we are Germans. But there is we need a new migration policy, because I can tell you, I talked to a guy who had a car sharing company within Allgäu, Kempten, and he told me that he's hoping for unemployment because he's searching for new employees and he couldn't find some for at least 2 years. People looking out for other companies going down that they can get some new employees. This is a question of new migration. And also, what is the future of Europe? We still didn't have an answer for that. At the questions of refugees, every country of Europe is looking for an answer, but we don't look together for an answer. But if you want to cope with 67 million of refugees worldwide, and a big part of it coming to Europe, we need a solution together and not alone. And so this is all. Behind all these questions is the question of the new system. What will be the new system? And it's not the old question of socialists or, it's not the old question. It's a new question. And we have to find the right questions and giving them the right answers. And this will be the main discussions next year for the elections.
So it sounds like you're talking about a new system for Germany, but also for Europe, right? I mean, you've widened the aperture a little bit by talking about Europe. And I guess I have one sort of follow-up question related to that is do you think that the current German presidency of the European Council can have an impact on creating that new system for Europe? Mm-hmm. Or do you think because it's part of an old government, it's still caught in some of the old ways?
Well, I have to tell something nice about Chancellor Merkel. She's working really hard on it. As far as I can see, she's working on all these questions of economic strength of Europe, finding solutions for a refugee system, finding solutions against the crisis, because we think after the Corona social crisis, there will be maybe an economic crisis, followed by a financial crisis. This would be the worst part. So now taking steps ahead to work against this crisis, to become a real crisis out of the situation. She's working really hard on it, but she's very alone. She's alone within Germany, and she's also alone within Europe. So she needs partners. And we as Greens are really good partners for this, because we've got new ideas. And talking about new structures, we have got an inner sense for it, for the change. And this makes us to the second strongest party by the time now, because the people see that we want to change things and we are optimists and not pessimists like any other party in this country.
So Ekin, let me push you a little bit on what's happening with the Greens. Since the beginning of the year, the party has had a great uptick in popularity in opinion polls and has been fairly consistently the second strongest party in many opinion polls. In some more recent polls, following the announcement of Olaf Scholz as the SPD's Kanzlerkandidat or chancellor candidate, the Greens have moved into the third place in some polls. Can you talk about the prospects for your party in regional elections over the next 12 months, but also in the general election next year? I mean, granted, that's a long way away. It's a year away. A lot can happen in a year.
Within the year.
But there are also some great opportunities for the Green Party. Can you talk a little bit about how you see your party navigating the coming months?
Well, it's hard to say at the situation now because we don't know what will happen within the next months. But the people are trusting in us because in the beginning of Corona crisis, we didn't talk about the interest of our party. We always talk about the interest of the people living in Germany. And we've been very creative partners to solving the problems in the Bundesländer, in the different states, but also in the German parliament. And the people are trusting in us. It's for sure that if you've got news like Olaf Scholz, and he's also the finance minister, he's got a lot of billions of money sides, which he will use next year for the elections, not within the party, but within the finance ministry. I can tell you where the money is staying. But he will use it for himself, but I don't think that this will help because all the answers you get from the Social Democrats is just only for the time being, but not for the future. The people learned that you need to think about the system of the future. And you need the courage to change the system, sometimes against the will of the people. Consumption of meat, for example, a huge problem. Every day we are putting 11,000 pigs into the trash can because they're not looking good for the consumer. The people tell us, we don't want this anymore. We don't want this system anymore. Or another problems, there are a lot of people now engaged in kind of transparency for clothing. They don't want to buy the t-shirt for €2 because they knew behind this €2 t-shirt, there is a woman in Bangladesh working for a penny and not able to live with this money. They want to take the social responsibility and this policy of the social responsibility. This is the future of this country because we are not selling, empty cases. We want to sell our products, our machines to countries who should be able to buy these machines. So we want other countries, this is also a global question. We want other countries to get strong enough to buy our machines. Starting with this, the people are believing and trusting in us, and also the climate change. Some newspapers wrote with the Corona problem, there is no discussion of climate change anymore, but there is a question of climate change because the people learned that they can live without flights. They can change their mobility by themselves. They can change where they buy their eggs by themselves. So this is a question of climate change. And the only party which is addressing this are the Greens. And the last answer to this is our young people. My son, he's 18. He doesn't ask anymore. He tells me, oh, you have always told us as Greens that the future is ours, but the future for me is now. It's not in 10 or 15 years, please change. He told us, our family, now I'm a vegetarian because this is what I can do for climate change. Please sell your car and take a small one. This is what you can do for a climate change. The young people in Germany are changing the world, and especially their parents, and these parents are the voters.
Well, Ekin Deligőz, I want to thank you for this very thoughtful and thought-provoking, wide-ranging conversation. We've touched on a lot of issues, and you've highlighted some of the national but also global opportunities and challenges inherent in the current moment that we're experiencing. And I just want to thank you for your openness and for sharing your thoughts with us today.
Thank you for this invitation, and it was good to see you, Steve.
It was great to see you, and I hope that we'll be able to see each other in person before too long. But until then, stay well, and to our viewers as well, stay well and stay healthy.